on an answer find and shade worksheet that's covering basic decimal practice. Well, first off, what's a decimal? Well, a decimal is a number that's less than 1. So basically, it's kind of like saying it's a piece. It's not even a whole. And an answer find and shade worksheet, all you do is answer the problems, find them in the picture, and shade them in. Answer, find, and shade. Well, let's take a look at the problems. Problems 1 through 6, the directions say write each fraction as a decimal. So all we're doing is changing a fraction into a decimal. And basically, there's 2 ways of doing this. So let's come down here and let me show you the 2 ways. The first method can be used to change any fraction to a decimal. So the fraction we were just looking at was 5 over 10. And the idea is you're going to change the fraction into a long division problem. Now, a lot of people get confused how to change a fraction to a long division problem. And I always think to myself of this scary monster who hates fractions.
I hate fractions.
And this monster loves to tip the fractions over.
I love tipping fractions over.
So the monster comes up and he tips the fraction over. And as you can see, the fraction falls over. And the 5 lands here, and the 10 lands here. And the 5 says,
oh no, someone save me.
And the 10 says,
build a house.
And so the 5 builds a division house. And now you have your long division problem. Now when we look at this, you're already saying,
wait a second, the 10's bigger than the 5. How can we divide?
Well, you have to add a decimal. And after you add the decimal, you can start adding as many zeros as you want. On this problem, I think we only need 1 0. Let's bring the decimal straight up. Now, we look at it. Can 10 go into 5? No, so we can put a 0. Can 10 go into 50? Yes. And 5 times 10 is 50, so you put a 5 here. And you get 50, and you subtract, and you get 0, and you're done. So 5 tenths, or 5 over 10, equals 0.5. And you're done. And you can use this method to change any fractions to a decimal. For instance, if I gave you 2/5, and let's say our monster comes up.
Hello again there, Mr. Fraction. No, he's gonna tip us over.
They fall over. The 2 lands here. The 5 lands here. The 2 says,
oh no, I better build a house.
And he builds a house. And you have your long division problem. Add a decimal. Now you can add as many zeros as you need. Bring the decimal straight up. And now you can divide. So the 5 is bigger than the 2, so you put a 0 here. You can actually do this like this. Subtract. You bring down the 0. Can 5 go into 20? Yes. How many times? 4. 4 times 5 is 20. You subtract, you get 0. So 2/5, or 2 over 5, equals 0.4. See, this method is a good way of changing a fraction to a decimal. Now there's another way of doing it that's really fast. It's actually probably perfect for this worksheet because we're dealing with denominators that have 10, 100, or 1,000 as the numbers. So the first one was 5 tenths, or 5 over 10. A quick way of doing this is just write the 5. As you can see, there's no decimal point. Well, if the decimal is not in sight, it's on the right. So the decimal is actually right there. And since we have 10 as the denominator, it means we're dividing by 10. And you see how it has only 1 0? Well, all you do is move the decimal 1 place to the left. And this would equal 0.5. You move the decimal how many zeros there are. So if we had 5 over 100, we'd write the 5. The decimal is not in sight, so it must be on the right. There it is. And since we have 2 zeros this time, we move the decimal back to the left 2 spaces. And what do you think you add in this empty space? You've got it. Since there's nothing there, we put a 0. So this equals 0.05. Really quick, do you see this 0 right here? You don't have to write it. We just put it there to show that there's basically no whole number. There's 0. You can actually write 0.05. They mean the same exact thing. It's up to you how you want to write it. But on this worksheet, you probably have to find the 0.05 in the picture. Well, there's your two ways of solving these problems. I think for this worksheet, method 2 is the quick, fast way of doing it. If you want to change any fraction to a decimal, method 1 is a better way. So let's go back up to the problems. Problem number 1. We had 5/10. So I write 5 right here. The decimal's not in sight, so it must be on the right. There it is. I see I have 1 0, so I move the decimal 1 space over right there. There it is. So our answer is 0.5. Number 2, I write the 3. The decimal's not in sight, so it must be on the right. It's right there. I have 2 zeros here, so I need to move it 2 spaces to the left. 1, 2. It's right here now, so I put a 0, and I end up with 0.03. If you like, you can put a 0 right there to show that there's no whole number. Now, when you look at the answer find in shade on problem number 1, we're looking for 0.5. So I look in the picture for 0.5, 0.5, which is right here. So I'd shade this in. And there you go. Now, there's probably more than one of them, so you have to find all of them. And number 2, you'd find 0.03 somewhere on the picture, and you would shade them in. Where is 0.03? Oh, there it is. So you would shade it in. And again, there's probably more than one of them. I'm just showing you where one is. This is what I want you to do. I want you to finish off problems 3 through 6. Do them on your own. So press pause. When you're done, press play, and then we can check your answers. All right? See you in a bit. Welcome back. We're looking at problems 3 through 6, so let's do these really quick. Problem 3, you've got 81. Again, the decimal's not in sight, so it must be on the right. We have 2 zeros, which means we need to move the decimal 2 spaces to the left. 1, 2, so it's right here now. I can put a 0 right there, so we get 0.81. Now, you know we're moving it to the left because we're making the number smaller, and by moving the decimal to the left, we make the number smaller. Number 4, we got 4. The decimal's not in sight, so it's on the right. It's right there. We have a 1 0. We move the decimal 1 space over. It's right there. And I add a 0. So we're looking at 0.4. If it helps, we can always erase these lines right here so you don't get confused. Number 5, we have 74. The decimal's not in sight, so it's on the right there. We have 2 zeros. We have 100. So we move the decimal 2 spaces. 1, 2. There you go. Add a 0, so we get 0.74. Last one, number 6 is 6. The decimal is not in sight, so it's on the right. It's right there. We have 2 zeros, so we need to move it 2 spaces. 1, 2. And we add a 0 in the empty space because there's nothing there, and we can put a 0 in the beginning, so we get 0.06. If you want, you can go back and erase these pieces so it doesn't look so messy, and there you go. Now, problems 7 through 16. The directions say write each problem as a decimal. So we're doing the same thing, but this time they're word problems. So we need to read the problem and then change it to a decimal. Now, some of you might be able to just read this really quick and say, I know the answer. I can write it down. Well, if you know it that fast, you don't have to listen to me. Just work on the worksheet on your own. If you need my help still, just pay attention. So look at problem number 7. Problem 7 says 48 hundredths. So you just put 48 over 100. And if you have 48 hundredths, you write 48. And if the decimal is not in sight, it's on the right. We have 2 zeros, so we just move the decimal 2 spaces. 1, 2. And the decimal is right here. So you get 0.48 or 48 hundredths. Why don't you try doing 8 through 16 on your own? So press pause. When you're finished, press play. And again, we'll check your answers. See you soon. All right, welcome back. We're looking at problem 8. 8 says 2/10. or 2 over 10. Again, put the 2. Decimal's not in sight, so it's on the right. We have 1 0, so we just move it over one space right over there, and we get 0.2. Number 9. Number 9 says 5 cents. So we're talking about money. Usually when you write money, there's 2 decimal spaces. Like for example, if I wrote $2 with money, you see how there's 2 digits? 1, 2 right there. So when you talk about money, 2 decimal spaces. So now we're talking about money, and we have 5 cents. Some of you might think 5 cents is this. But I just told you need 2 decimal places. So if we're writing it like this, we'd have to add a 0 right there, and now we get 50. That's 50 cents. So to write 5 cents, we have to write it like this, because you get 5 cents. So 5 cents looks like 0.05. Do you see how this cannot be 5 cents? Because you need 2 decimal spaces, which would give you 50. Let's look at number 12 really quick. We have 10 cents. So is 10 cents this one, or is 10 cents this one? You guessed it, it's that one because that's 10. So you write 0.10. Do you see how when you're talking about money, you have 2 decimal spaces in the answer? All right, let's go back to number 9. Number 9, we have 9 hundredths. And if we write 9 hundredths, we write 9. The decimal's not in sight, it's on the right, it's right there. And since we have 2 zeros, we move the decimal 2 spaces over, 1, 2, and we're done. 0.09. Number 11, we have 23 hundredths. So it'll look like that. So I write 23. Again, the decimal's not in sight, so it must be on the right. We have 2 zeros, or we have 100, or hundredths. So we move the decimal 2 spaces over, 1, 2. So we get 0.23. We did number 12. Number 13 is 8 hundredths. So we would write 8 over 100. And so then we'd write 8. The decimal's not in sight, must be on the right. And we have 2 zeros, so we need to move the decimal 2 spaces to the left. 1, 2. We put a 0 in the empty space, and we get 0.08. Let me clean this up a little bit so it doesn't look too messy. There we go. All right, number 14. Number 14, we have 7 tenths. So that means we write 7. The decimal's not in sight. It must be on the right. And since we have 10 or 1 0, we move the decimal 1 space to the left. There you go, 0.7. Number 15. Wow, we're just cooking through these. We have 25 cents. Well, that's easy. We just write 25. And since it's cents, we have 2 digits. So it's 25 cents. 0.25. Again, when you're talking about money and cents, you should have 2 decimals or 2 digits or 2 spaces after the decimal. So there we go, 25. Now we have 90 hundredths. 90. We write 90 over 100. That's 90 hundredths. So then we write 90 over here. We have the decimal. Since we have 100, 2 zeros, we move the decimal 2 spaces, 1, 2. So we get 0.90. Those are the answers from 7 through 16. Check your answers, make sure they're correct. If you're confused or if I'm going too fast, you can always press pause and go back and listen to me again. If you get it and this is like really easy for you and you understand it, you don't have to listen to me. Just work on the worksheet on your own. But if you still need my help, let's look at the next section. The next section says multiple choice. Match each problem to the appropriate letter on the number line. Shade in the corresponding letter. So once we answer these, we actually have to find the letter up here in the picture and shade it in. So now we're not looking for numbers, we're looking for the letters. All right, let's look at problem 17. Ooh, it's an adding problem. We have 0.45 plus 0.30. Well, if we write this, we can write this on top of each other to work downwards. Always line up your decimal when you're adding. See how my decimals are right above each other? Bring the decimals straight down. And all we do is 5 plus 0 is 5, 4 plus 3 is 7, and we get 0.75. If we look on the number line, we have to find out where 0.75 would be. Well, of course, it'll be between 0.7 and 0.8, which gives us D. So write D here for our answer, and we go find this up in the picture. So you'd be looking for all the D's. I see one right off the bat. One's right there. So you'd shade in all the D's. I'm sure there's more than one of them, but that's what you would need to do. All right, let's come back down here. Why don't you try doing problems 18 through 25 on your own? So press pause. When you're finished, press play and come back to me and we'll check your answers. All right, welcome back. Let's start off with problem 18. 18 says 30 36 hundredths, or 36 over 100. So that means we have 36. The decimal is not in sight, so it's on the right. We have 100, which means we have 2 zeros, so we move the decimal 2 spaces, and that gives us 0.36. Now, 0.36 is going to be between 0.3 and 0.4, and the only one there is K. So this must be K. Problem 19, we have 0.84 minus 0.57. Again, make sure you line up your decimals. You come straight down, the decimal is right there. 4 minus 7, you can't do it, so you need to borrow. The 8 becomes a 7, the 4 becomes 14. 14 minus 7 is 7, 7 minus 5 is 2, and we get 0.27. That's going to be between 0.2 and 0.3, so that has to be E. So we put E here, and we find that in our picture and shade it in. Problem 20 is 8/10, or 8 over 10. So we have 8, the decimal is not in sight, so it must be on the right. It's right there, and since we have 10, we have 1 0. We move it 1 space over, and we get 0.8. So we just find 0.8 on our number line, which is B. So we got B. Next one, we have 0.19 plus 0.72. My decimals are lined up. I bring the decimal straight down. 9 plus 2 is 11. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 plus 7 is 9. And I add a 0. So I get 0.91. So that means it's really, really close to 0.9. And the one that's really close to it is H. Now you know it's not L because L would be less than 0.9. And we have 0.91. So it'd have to be greater than 0.9, which is H. Number 22, we have 8 over 100. So we have 8. The decimal is not in sight, so it's on the right. It's right there. And since we have 2 zeros, we move it 2 spaces. 1, 2. So it's right here. And we add a 0 in the empty space. So really we get 0.08. So this means it's less than 0.1. So we come over here. We find our 0.1. And we know it's less than it. So it has to be really close. So most likely it's C. It's not M. I think M's too far away. So it'd have to be C. Now, do you see how this is less than 0.1? Because it's 2 digits past the decimal. See that? So it's less than 0.1. All right, we're almost done. Problem 23, we have 63, and we have 2 zeros, so we move the decimal 2 spaces. 1, 2. It's right there, and we add a 0, so we get 0.63. So that means it's between 0.6 and 0.7. So which one would it be? Would it be R or G? Well, since it's 0.63, it means it's closer to 0.6. And R is the closer one, so I would choose R. Let me clean up this mess a little, because we're getting a little messy here. Let me get rid of this. Number 24. You have 0.53 and 0.42. You are going to subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. 5 minus 4 is 1. Bring the decimal straight down. Don't forget about that. So you get 0.11. So this is really, really close to 0.1. So it's somewhere right around here, which would give us J. So this answer is J. And then you have 50 hundredths. So I'd write 50 over 100. Or 50. The decimal is not in sight, so it's on the right. And I move it 2 spaces because we have 100, which has 2 zeros. So I move it 2 spaces, so I get 0.50. Well, actually, you don't have to worry about that 0 right there. So really you have 0.5, which is right here, which is P. So P is our answer. Sorry about that. I didn't write all the letters in for the problems. We know 23 is R. We know that is J. We know 22 is what? C. 21 was H. So there's all your answers. Why don't you try doing the last 2 word problems on your own, 26 and 27. It just says, the directions say, choose the decimal that best explains the problem, shade in the corresponding letter. So give it a try on your own. So press pause. When you're finished, press play, and I'll go over it with you. Welcome back. We're looking at problem 26. 26 says, there are 10 children playing soccer. 3 of them are girls. Write a decimal for the number of boys playing soccer. Well, if there's 10 of them and 3 are girls, that means the other 7 must be boys. So that means 7 out of 10 are boys. And to change that to a decimal, we write 7. And since we have 1 0, the decimal is not in sight, so it must be on the right. And we just move it 1 space over. So it's right there. So we get 0.7. So it must be T. Problem number 27. Bob has taken 100 quizzes this year. He received a passing grade on 82 of them. Write a decimal showing how many quizzes he passed. So he got 82 out of 100. So we write 82. The decimal is not in sight, so it must be on the right. We have 2 zeros, so we just move the decimal 2 spaces to the left, and we get 0.82. And 0.82 would be Y. Well, we're all done. Remember, if I went too fast, you can always go back and watch this again. If you got it, great. All right, well, I hope I helped. See you next time. Bye-bye.